The alien ships appeared without warning at the edge of the solar system. One moment, the space past Neptune was empty and quiet. The next, a fleet of 12 vessels ripped into reality. Their arrival was not a flash or a bang, but a silent tear in the fabric of space itself. They were beautiful. Their hulls shone with a soft, pearly light, smooth and curved like sea stones. They moved together in a perfect diamond formation, a display of unity and absolute control. To any human eye, they looked like something from an old, hopeful science fiction film on the moon. In a buried listening post called Plato Crater Base, Park Min was drinking cold coffee. The alert screamed across his screens. His mug slipped from his hand, shattering on the metal floor. Data scrolled past his wide eyes, energy signatures, mass readings, vectors. It was not a meteor shower. It was not a drill. "Commander," he whispered into his headset, his voice rough with sudden fear. "We have multiple contacts. Trans-Neptunian orbit. They just appeared. 100 million miles away, in a hidden command center built into a captured asteroid called Vigil." Commander Kim Jae watched the same data feed. His face, lit by the blue glow of holograms, was still. He was a man in his 50s, with short gray hair and eyes that had long ago learned not to show surprise. He had waited for this day for most of his adult life. "Confirm the count," Kim Jae said, his voice calm and low. 12 capital vessels, sir." Park Min's voice replied through the speakers. "Pattern suggests a command ship at the center. They are holding position. No weapons active. But the power readings are off the scale. Beyond anything we have." On Earth, in unified government halls, panic began to spread. Leaders were woken from sleep. Emergency meetings convened on shaky video links. The long-dreaded moment had arrived. First contact was here, and it was a fleet. Then the signal came. It flooded every frequency, from the oldest radio bands to the newest quantum channels. It was a voice, deep and resonant, speaking in perfect, unaccented Korean. It had learned their language from decades of eavesdropping. "People of Earth," the voice began. It was polite, almost gentle. "We are the Kalar hegemony. We have journeyed across the stars and found you. We see a world of great potential, but also great chaos. You are children playing with fire on a fragile world." In the crowded control room of Vigil, officers and technicians froze, listening. Lee Yuna, the lead engineer, stopped her work on a stealth drive schematic. She pushed her dark hair from her face, her clever eyes fixed on the main speaker. The alien voice continued. "Your history is a sad story of war and waste. You are not ready for the galaxy. But you do not have to be afraid. We offer you peace. We offer you order. Surrender your world to our stewardship. Disarm your primitive forces. Welcome our administrators. You will be integrated into our benevolent hegemony. You will be protected and guided." A graphic accompanied the message, showing Earth becoming a peaceful, green jewel under the gentle hand of the hegemony. It was a picture of utopia. "This is not a request," the voice said, its tone hardening just slightly. "It is the only logical path. You have 24 of your hours to send your full and unconditional surrender. If you refuse, we will be forced to bring order ourselves. The consequences will be regrettable. We await your wise decision." The transmission ended. The silence it left behind was heavier than any noise. On Earth, the arguing grew louder. Some leaders cried that they must surrender to save lives. Others shouted that they must fight for freedom, no matter the cost. The debates were chaotic and filled with fear. But on Vigil, there was no debate. Kim Jae had trained for this. The entire human defense strategy for 30 years had been built for this single moment. He turned from the main screen to look at his crew. Park Min's anxious face was on one monitor. Lee Yuna's determined expression was just a few feet away. "They are so sure of themselves," Lee Yuna said quietly. "They didn't even scan properly. They think they see everything."
Kim Jae nodded.
The Kalar had seen Earth's visible cities, its public space stations, its old orbital labs. They had seen the face humanity showed to the universe. They had not seen what was hidden. Park Min, Kim Jae said. Yes, Commander? Open a channel. Tight beam. Directly to their lead ship. Park Min's fingers flew over his console. Channel open, sir. Kim Jae stood straight. He did not look like a heroic commander from a story. He looked like a tired man with a very hard job. He spoke clearly into the silence. This is Commander Kim Jae of Earth's Unified Defense Fleet. Your terms are unacceptable. Stand by for our counterproposal. He made a cutting motion with his hand. The channel closed. The room was utterly still. They had just rejected an ultimatum from a superior alien power. Lee Yuna allowed herself a small, tight smile. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone whose darkest calculations were proving correct. On the bridge of the Shining Kaler command ship, far away, the alien speaker received the short message. It did not understand the words, counterproposal. In 1,000 years of integrating other species, no one had ever offered a counterproposal. The hegemony gave orders. Others obeyed. This was illogical. It was a delay tactic, the speaker decided. A final, pathetic act of pride from a frightened species. The speaker was not worried. Let them have their 24 hours. What could they possibly do? The memory hit Park Min like a physical thing. He was back in a lab 23 years younger, his hands stained with cheap instant noodle broth. He had been a brilliant young linguist, obsessed with patterns in cosmic background radiation. Everyone thought it was a useless hobby. Then, one Tuesday, he found a pattern that was not random. It was a repeating signal, hidden deep in the noise, like a whisper in a storm. It was not a message. It was a heartbeat, a very quiet, very clever electronic heartbeat. He called his friend, Lee Yuna. She was an engineering student who could build anything from spare parts. She thought he was crazy, but she helped him anyway. They used borrowed telescope time and a receiver she built from old satellite parts. They found it, a small, smooth object tucked behind a near-Earth asteroid. It was not a rock. It was perfect. It was watching. That was humanity's first contact. Not with aliens, but with their silent, unnoticed spy probe. Park Min blinked, the memory fading. He was back in Plato Crater Base, staring at the 12 beautiful warships on his screen. The fear was still there, cold in his stomach. But under it now was a solid layer of anger. They had been watched. They had been judged. And they had been found weak. He opened the channel to Vigil again. Commander, I have the full linguistic analysis of their message. The word, benevolent, was used 4 times. The word, order, 7. It's a script, sir. They've done this before. On Vigil, Kim Jae listened. He knew this already. The discovery of the probe had been the greatest and most terrifying secret in human history. It had not been shared with the public. Instead, it became the foundation for everything that came next. Lee Yuna pulled up old files on her screen. They were schematics not of advanced human tech, but of the probe. We took it apart for 10 years, she said, mostly to herself. Every molecule. It was beautiful technology. Self-repairing. Stealthy. It sent its reports back home in tight bursts we couldn't intercept. She remembered the global meeting after the probe was secured. The leaders were not united then. There were shouts, accusations, despair. One faction wanted to build giant, friendly ships to greet the aliens when they came. Another wanted to hide, to pretend it never happened. But a third group, led by people like Kim Jae, then a young, cold-eyed strategist, had won the argument. They see a child, he had said. They see a messy, fighting child. If we show them a warrior, they will bring a bigger warrior to crush us. We cannot win a fair fight, so we will not fight fair. We will not be where they expect. We will not be what they expect. And so the Dark Fleet was born, not as a military project, but as a civil one. Asteroid mining was expanded. Solar power collection in space became a priority. All of it was public, peaceful. But the best minds, like Lee Yuna, were quietly moved to hidden places. Their job was not to copy the alien probe's sleek design. It was to understand its weaknesses. Its sensors were amazing, Lee Yuna explained to a young technician now, her finger tracing a line on the new scan of the Kaler ships. But they looked for certain things. energy signatures like their own, large metallic structures, communications they could understand. It ignored space debris. It ignored small, cold objects. It dismissed random electromagnetic noise as background. She smiled that tight, unhappy smile again. Humanity had spent decades learning to look like background. On Earth, the public debate raged. News channels showed experts arguing. People protested for peace. Others demanded defiance. The Kaler ultimatum was the only thing anyone could talk about. It was a perfect display of the chaos the aliens had described. The Kaler ships began to move. Slowly, majestically, they entered the solar system. They passed the orbit of Neptune. They were coming closer, a slow, pressure-building march. They scanned the inner system openly. They saw the orbital farms, the big solar stations, the old lunar bases. They saw the panic on the news channels. They saw exactly what they expected to see. Kim Jae watched their approach on the map. A slow, confident bloom of light. "Begin Phase 1, he said. His voice was quiet. "The mask stays on. Let them see the fear. Let them see the disorder." Park Min took a deep breath. His job was to be the face of that disorder. He opened a channel to the Kaler fleet. He made his voice sound nervous, hesitant. He asked for more time. He asked for clarification on the terms of integration. He spoke about the difficulties of unifying Earth's many nations. The Kaler speaker answered with cool patience. The terms were non-negotiable. The time was fixed. The speaker's voice was like a teacher talking to a slow student. Park Min could hear the disdain underneath the polite words. It made his anger burn hotter. While Park Min played his part, Lee Yuna gave her own orders. Across the solar system, in the asteroid belt, in the shadow of Mars, cold machines powered up. They did not glow. They did not broadcast signals. They were jagged and dark, shaped like rocks. They began to move, not with bright drives, but with gentle pushes of contained plasma. They drifted, like natural debris, into the predicted path of the Kaler fleet. They were not weapons. Not yet. They were ears. They were eyes. They were Lee Yuna's children, sent to listen and to learn. The Kaler scanners swept over them. The machines were made of stone and carbon fiber. Their energy output was near zero. To the Kaler sensors, they were just more space junk. The beautiful alien ships passed them by without a second glance. Kim Jae watched the first data packets come in. Thermal readings of the alien hulls. Energy fluctuations in their engines. It was the first real military intelligence on their enemy. "They are not scanning for the right things," Lee Yuna said, her eyes shining with fierce pride. "They are looking for a civilization like theirs. They are not looking for ghosts." The 24 hours were slipping away. On Earth, the fear reached a fever pitch. The Kaler fleet was now a bright point in the sky, visible from the dark side of the planet. A symbol of doom. On vigil, the mood was different. It was tense, but it was focused. They were not waiting for their fate. They were preparing a surprise. Park Min continued his sad, stalling diplomacy. Lee Yuna's silent machines continued to gather their data. And Kim Jae watched the clock, knowing that when it hit zero, the Kaler would not find a surrendering child. They would find something the galaxy had not seen before. They would find a trap, built by a species that had learned the darkest lesson of all. In a dark forest, the only way to survive is to become something the other predators do not understand. Lee Yuna's workspace on Vigil was a mess of wires, holographic schematics, and half-drunk cups of cold tea. Right now, her focus was on a single screen. It showed the data feed from one of her dark, drifting machines. The machine was close enough to a Kaler cruiser to see the fine details of its hull. The data was not about weapons or shield power. It was about communications. A river of information flowed between the alien ships. It was encrypted, of course, but the Kaler were not being subtle. They were talking to each other constantly, a stream of status reports, sensor logs, and command updates. It was the habit of an empire used to being in charge, with no fear of eavesdroppers. "They're chatty," she muttered, her fingers flying over her console. She wasn't trying to break the main encryption. That would take time they didn't have. She was looking for something else, the rhythm. Every machine, every living system had a rhythm, a heartbeat. She found it in the power management signals. To keep a ship that big running, thousands of tiny adjustments were made every second. The signals that made these adjustments were simpler, more regular. They were the background hum of the ship's life, and they were barely encrypted. Lee Yuna called over a young programmer, a woman named Jiun. "I need a virus, but not a normal one." Jiun looked nervous. "A virus? To do what?" "Not to destroy, to whisper." Lee Yuna pointed at the rhythm on the screen. "This is their pulse. I want you to write a code that mimics it. A code that can hide inside these power signals. It doesn't attack. It just listens. And then, it whispers back." Jiun's eyes widened as she understood. A feedback ghost. "We make their own systems seem noisy to themselves." Lee Yuna nodded. "Exactly. We don't create new problems. We amplify the tiny ones they already ignore. A sensor reads a tiny piece of space dust. Our ghost makes it look like a small cloud. A power line has a minor fluctuation. Our ghost makes it flicker just for a millisecond. We don't break their ship. We make them doubt their own ship." Meanwhile, Park Min was deep in his own kind of warfare. The Kaler speaker had demanded to speak to Earth's global leader. Park Min, following Kim Jae's orders, gave them a different person every hour. First, a trembling representative from a small island nation. Then, a loud, angry general from a former superpower. Then, a scientist who gave a long, confusing speech about human rights. The goal was to show chaos, to show a species that could not get its act together. Park Min fed the performance, his heart hammering with a mix of fear and theater. He would apologize for the delay, blame bureaucratic confusion, promise a final answer soon. The Kaler speaker's patience was clearly thinning. Its polite tone began to develop a hard edge. "Your disorganization proves our point," it said during one exchange. "You need the order we provide. This delay serves no purpose." "We are trying," Park Min replied, letting his voice sound strained and desperate. "It is a complex process. Please, just a little more time." While this played out, the Kaler fleet continued its slow advance. They were nearing the asteroid belt, and Lee Yuna's quiet machines were now all around them, clinging to rocks like dark barnacles. Kim Jae watched the main tactical display. The 12 glowing icons of the Kaler fleet were a bright cluster. Around them, hundreds of tiny gray dots, Lee Yuna's sensors and the first of the weapon platforms, were slowly moving into position. They moved with the natural drift of the belt. Nothing that would show up as a threat. "Begin the whispers," Kim Jae ordered. Lee Yuna sent the signal. The code, small and hungry, was transmitted from her machines. It did not try to pierce the Kaler shields. It rode in on low-power maintenance channels, the kind left open for internal drones and repair systems. It was a digital rat, sneaking in through a crack in the foundation. On the lead Kaler ship, an engineering drone reported a minor anomaly in a secondary sensor array. The reading was so small it was automatically filed away. A moment later, a power relay on another ship flickered, then stabilized. The system logged it as cosmic ray interference. The whispers had begun. The Kaler fleet entered the denser part of the asteroid belt. Their shields gently deflected small rocks. Their sensors painted a clear picture. To them, it was empty space except for natural debris. They saw none of the angular, shadowed shapes that had been waiting there for years, powered down and frozen. Park Min, looking at the clock, initiated the final act of his play. He opened a channel, his face on their screens looking tired and defeated. "Honored speaker," he said, his voice heavy. "After much struggle, the nations of Earth have agreed to send a delegation. A final delegation to discuss terms face-to-face. A ship will come out to meet you. It will carry our most senior leaders. Please do not fire. They come in peace, to hear your wisdom. It was the ultimate sign of surrender. Sending your leaders out helplessly." The Kaler speaker seemed to soften. This was more like it. This was the logical conclusion. "We will receive your delegation," the speaker said. "Have them approach our lead ship. Their safety is guaranteed." The channel closed. On vigil, the air was electric. The trap was set. The Kaler were expecting a ship of frightened diplomats. They were looking for it, their sensors tuned to find a small, warm, brightly beaconed vessel. They were not looking at the cold rocks around them. They were not noticing the strange, faint ghosts in their own systems. They were confident. They were focused on the final act of a play they thought they were directing. Kim Jae looked around the quiet command center. At Lee Yuna, who was monitoring her whispering code. At Park Min, who was wiping sweat from his brow after his performance. "They took the bait," Kim Jae said, his voice still calm. "They see exactly what we want them to see. Now we wait for them to get comfortable. A predator is most vulnerable when it thinks the hunt is over." Far away on the Kaler command ship, the speaker observed the human system with satisfaction. The primitive, chaotic humans were finally behaving logically. They were coming to surrender. Soon, this messy little planet would be brought into the order. It was, the speaker thought, a good day's work. It never once looked at the silent, dark shapes slowly turning to face them, their weapon ports opening without a sound. The Kaler speaker watched the human ship approach. It was exactly as promised. A single, small vessel, shining under the light of the distant sun. This transponder broadcast a message of peace. Its engines were weak and slow. It carried the heat signatures of 21 human bodies, their heartbeats rapid with fear, picked up by sensitive Kaler medical scanners. The speaker felt a wave of calm satisfaction. This was the proper order of things. Resistance was always just a phase. All species eventually saw the logic, the necessity, of the hegemony's guidance. This would be a simple, clean integration. A case study for future operations. Hold all weapons. The speaker commanded its bridge crew. Let the human delegation dock. Extend the atmospheric corridor. I will greet them in the primary hangar bay myself. It was a gesture of benevolence. A show of strength, too. Let them see the clean, graceful interior of a hegemony ship. Let them understand the vast gap between their technology and the Kalers. Fear would turn to awe, and awe to obedience. On the bridge of vigil, the mood was stone cold. The approaching ship, the diplomat's hope, was real. It had been built years ago for exactly this purpose. But the 21 life signs inside were not human leaders. They were sophisticated androids, their programming limited to looking terrified and walking slowly. Their only true payload was in their combined core processors. A dense, brutal package of Lee Yuna's most aggressive whispering codes. "It's docked," a technician reported, his voice tight. Kim Jae nodded. "Begin the transmission." On the Kaler ship, the speaker stood in the vast, brightly lit hangar bay. The human airlock door opened. The first of the human delegates shuffled out. It was an older male model, its face set in a mask of grim resignation. It walked forward, then stopped as if overcome. The speaker took a step forward, ready to deliver its welcome speech. Then the android's head tilted, his mouth opened. But the voice that came out was not the trembling voice of a diplomat. It was Commander Kim Jae's voice, flat and clear, translated perfectly into the Kaler language. "You judged our book by its cover," the android said. "You never read the pages." The speaker froze. The words made no sense. It was a nonsense phrase. A trick. Then, the lights on the Kaler ship flickered. It was not a major flicker. Just a momentary dimming in the hangar bay. The speaker dismissed it as a power transfer issue with the docked human ship. But then, on the bridge, warning symbols bloomed on several screens. A sensor array on the ship's lower hull reported a sudden, brief temperature spike. A ghost image. A coolant system on another deck pulsed, its flow rate jumping for a single second before correcting. Lee Yuna's whispers were no longer whispering. They were shouting. The code delivered by the androids was a key. It connected all the little ghosts she had seeded in their systems. It turned 100 tiny, unrelated errors into a coordinated symphony of confusion. Sensor logs showed impossible things. Small objects moving at impossible speeds, energy signatures that appeared and vanished. Internal communications crackled with static no one could find. On the Kaler bridge, an officer reported, Speaker, we are experiencing multiple minor system anomalies. Sensor reliability is dropping to 92%. Find the source. The speaker ordered, its first flicker of irritation showing. It looked back at the androids. They had all stopped moving, standing like statues, their purpose complete. It's a distraction, the speaker realized aloud. A primitive digital attack. Focus. Find the real threat. Scan for hidden ships. For weapons platforms. The Kaler fleet, so perfectly arranged, began to stir. Ships adjusted position, their powerful active sensors pulsing out, painting the asteroid belt with energy. They were looking for warships now, for the hidden human fleet they suddenly feared must exist. They found nothing. No large energy signatures, no drive plumes, no hulls of warships. What their sensors did see and dismiss were the asteroids themselves. Because Lee-Yuna's platforms were not shaped like ships. They were shaped like rocks, and when powered down, they were just part of the belt's background. But now, as the Kaler's own sensor energy washed over them, they reacted. Each dark platform had a skin made of a special material. It absorbed most sensor energy, making it nearly invisible. But a small part of the energy it absorbed was stored, and it had a threshold. Across the fleet, a junior Kaler sensor operator saw something odd. A cluster of 3 asteroids, right at the edge of the formation, reflected back a sensor ping with a strange, perfect delay. It was a tiny anomaly in a sea of new anomalies. He almost ignored it, but the order was to find the threat. He tagged it for review. That tag was the trigger. The absorbed energy in those 3 platforms reached their threshold. The platforms did not power up. They shattered. They exploded outward not with fire, but with clouds of fine, black dust. It was not normal dust. It was dust-sized particles of carbon and refined metal, designed to scatter and cling. The clouds spread fast, blown by the momentum of the explosions, enveloping the nearest Kaler cruiser. On the cruiser's bridge, alarms sounded. The cloud was clinging to their hull. It was blocking external sensors. It was causing minor overheating on the skin. It was not a weapon. It was a blindfold. Clear it. Use defensive particle beams, the cruiser's captain ordered. The beautiful ship fired slim beams of energy, trying to vaporize the dust cloud. It worked, but it took time. And for those minutes, that ship was blind and distracted. All across the formation, similar small, confusing events happened. A shower of tiny inert projectiles, like coarse sand, peppered another ship's hull, sounding like distant rain. A third ship found its long-range communications jammed by a burst of random radio noise, the same kind of noise Lee-Yuna had studied from old human television broadcasts. The Kaler fleet was not being attacked. It was being annoyed. It was being confused. It was being made to look in 100 wrong directions. And in that confusion, as the beautiful ships turned to deal with the dust and the noise and the ghosts in their machines, they finally moved out of their perfect defensive formation. Kim Jae watched it happen on his screen. The tight diamond was breaking up, becoming a scattered group of individual ships, each dealing with its own small, maddening crisis. He leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the glowing icons that were now slightly separated from one another. "Good," he said, his voice quiet in the silent command center. "They are no longer looking at each other. They are only looking at their own problems. Now they are alone." He turned to his weapons officer. "Signal all stations. The hunt is on. Target the ship on the outer edge, the one still clearing its sensors. Hit it with everything. Don't let it call for help." The order went out, not as a radio signal, but as a prearranged countdown, sent through buried laser links between the dark, silent rocks. For the first time, humanity's dark armada moved with purpose. And the Kaler, busy brushing away the gnats, never saw the wolf until its teeth were at their throat. Space around the Kaler cruiser light of Cerulean was filled with static. The black dust cloud still swirled around it, a gritty fog that stuck to its shining hull. Inside, the crew worked to clear their sensors. They were annoyed, not afraid. It was a dirty, primitive trick. The cruiser's captain focused his attention on the task. He ordered a drone to sweep the hull. He did not look at the long-range screens. Why would he? The threat, if there was one, was clearly some kind of electronic warfare from the pathetic human ship. The rest of the fleet was dealing with similar nuisances. He never saw the rock move. It was a dark, jagged piece of the asteroid belt, about the size of a small house. One moment it was drifting. The next, with no visible engine flare, it changed course. It was a subtle shift, but it was aimed directly at the light of Cerulean's side. An alarm finally sounded on the bridge. Proximity warning. The captain looked up, irritated. What is it? Asteroid fragment, Captain, a junior officer said. On a collision course. It must have been knocked loose by the particle beam fire. Destroy it, the captain ordered, waving a hand. A minor task for their point defense lasers. The lasers fired. Bright lines of light cut through the dust cloud. They struck the rock. It did not vaporize. Instead, its surface glowed red, then white, then shattered. But it did not shatter into harmless pebbles. It shattered into 6 smaller, denser projectiles, each the size of a ground vehicle. And they were now much closer, moving even faster. The captain's irritation turned to cold surprise. Evasive action. All forward shields to maximum. It was too late. The projectiles were not guided. They were simple, heavy slugs of tungsten and iron. They were dumb, brutal, and moving at a fraction of the speed of light. They did not try to avoid the shields. They simply hit them. The first 2 slugs struck the Kaler cruiser's energy shield. The shield flared a brilliant, painful blue and held for a microsecond before overloading and collapsing. The remaining 4 slugs punched into the beautiful hull. There was no explosion. There was a terrible, silent tearing. Metal screamed in the vacuum. The slugs tore straight through compartments, decks, and machinery, exiting the other side in a spray of molten debris. Atmosphere blasted out into space, carrying with it tiny, frozen crystals of water and air. The light of Cerulean went dark. Its lights died. Its drive sputtered and failed. It began to spin slowly, a dead thing leaking its life into the void. On the bridge of the Kaler command ship, the speaker stared at the display. The icon for the light of Cerulean had just turned from a soft blue to a harsh, blinking red. It had happened in seconds. One moment it was there, the next it was a crippled wreck. What happened? The speaker demanded, its voice sharp. Report. We don't know, speaker, a sensor officer stammered. It was hit by kinetic projectiles. They came from the asteroid field. From where? Show me the attacker. But the screens showed nothing. No enemy ship. No weapon signature. Just asteroids. The speaker's mind, trained for elegant space battles between visible fleets, could not process it. A trap. They are hiding. Find them. Full active scan now. As the Kaler fleet scrambled, turning their attention from the digital ghosts to the space around them, the real attack began. It did not come from one direction. It came from everywhere. From behind a larger asteroid, a human vessel slid into view. It was not beautiful. It was a flat, angular wedge of black metal, with no windows and no markings. It did not announce itself. It simply fired. A single, focused beam of pure plasma, hotter than the surface of a star, lanced out and sliced through the engine housing of another Kaler cruiser. The alien ship shuddered, its drive systems melting into useless slag. From the shadow of a dead moon, another dark shape emerged. This one released a cloud of smaller objects, not dust but drones. They were simple, deadly, and programmed for a single task. They swarmed a third Kaler ship like metal insects, attaching to its hull and detonating in precise, small explosions that cut sensor arrays and communication dishes. This was not a battle. It was an ambush, a slaughter. The Kaler fought back. Their energy weapons were powerful. They fired at the dark human ships, scoring hits. But the human ships did not have smooth, curved hulls. They were covered in sharp angles and heat-dispersing ridges. A Kaler beam would gouge a deep scar in the black metal, but it rarely struck anything vital. The human ships were built to take damage and keep fighting. And they fought in a way the Kaler found horrifying. They were silent. They gave no speeches, accepted no surrenders, issued no challenges. They just attacked. They used the asteroids for cover. They attacked from behind. They targeted engines and weapons, ignoring the rest of the ship. They wanted the Kaler ships dead in the water, not destroyed. Panic spread through the hegemony fleet. Their perfect formation was gone. Their communications were full of static and ghost signals. They could not see their enemy clearly. Every shadow in the asteroid belt now held terror. The speaker watched, its mind reeling, as another of its mighty cruisers was crippled by a barrage of kinetic rods fired from a human vessel that had been sitting powered down, right next to it. The human ship looked like a piece of space junk until the moment it moved. This was not war as the galaxy knew it. This was something older, darker. This was the war of the trap, the ambush, the attack from the deep dark where you could not see. Kim Jae watched the tactical map on Vigil. Red icons were blinking out, one by one, turning gray. Lee Yuna monitored the data, her face pale but set. Their coordination is broken. They're fighting as individuals now. They're scared. Park Min listened to the fragmented Kaler communications. The polite, superior tone was gone. He heard shouts, confusion, raw fear. He heard a captain screaming for orders that never came. Kim Jae leaned back. The plan had worked. The mask was off. Humanity was not a child to be guided. It was a predator that had been waiting in the tall grass for 30 years. And now it had sprung. Recall the hunter-killers, he ordered. Conserve ammunition. Move to Phase 3. Isolate the command ship. It's time to send our message. Outside, in the cold dark, the dark armada closed in. A silent pack surrounding the wounded, bewildered giants. The demand for Earth's surrender seemed like a joke from another lifetime. Now, the only question was what humanity would demand of them. The Kaler fleet was broken. Of the 12 glorious ships, only 5 were still fully functional. The others drifted, dark and crippled, vents leaking frozen gas into the vacuum. The beautiful formation was a memory. Now, the remaining ships huddled near their command vessel, like herd animals protecting their leader from wolves they could not see. Inside the command ship's bridge, the speaker stood in silence. The data feeds were chaos. Its mind, a mind trained for administration and orderly conquest, could not fit the events into a logical box. They had not been outfought. They had been unmade. By tricks and shadows. Speaker, a communications officer said, its voice thin with strain. We are being hailed. On a focused laser link. It is from the human commander. Audio only. The speaker straightened its robes. A part of it, the old proud part, wanted to refuse. But the pragmatic part knew they were cornered. Put it through. Commander Kim Jae's voice filled the bridge. It was calm. It was tired. It held no triumph. Kaler command vessel. This is your only warning. Power down all weapons and drives. Do not attempt to jump. We have placed suppression drones on your hull. If you try to run, they will detonate and cripple your jump core. The speaker looked at a secondary screen. A tactical officer nodded grimly. Scans showed 20 small, limpet-like devices attached to their ship's flank. They had been placed during the confusion, clinging like metal ticks. What do you want? The speaker asked, forcing its voice to remain steady. We want to talk, Kim Jae said. You will open your main hangar bay. You will deactivate all internal security fields. A single human shuttle will approach. It will carry a boarding party of 3. If any of them are harmed, we will reduce your ship to atoms. Do you understand? It was not a request. It was an instruction. The humiliation was total. The speaker gave the order on Vigil. Kim Jae turned to Lee Yuna and Park Min. You're up. Lee Yuna checked the heavy data case in her hand. Park Min adjusted the collar of his simple uniform. Neither of them looked like conquerors. They looked like technicians being sent on a difficult job. They boarded a small, boxy shuttle. It flew, unarmed and unescorted, towards the giant, wounded alien command ship. The hangar bay was enormous and gleaming. It was empty now, save for a contingent of Kaler soldiers in polished armor, their weapons held rigidly at their sides. The speaker stood at the front, alone. The human shuttle landed with a soft hiss. The ramp lowered. Lee Yuna walked out first, her eyes immediately scanning the architecture, the energy conduits, the door mechanisms. Park Min followed, his posture straight, his face a careful mask. Behind them came a single human marine, his rifle held across his chest, not aimed, but ready. The speaker looked at them. It had expected warriors, giants in armor. It saw instead two ordinary humans, one carrying a case, the other looking at it with the cool interest of a translator. The marine looked deadly, but he was just one. "You are the leaders of this force?" the speaker asked, its voice echoing in the vast space. "We are representatives," Park Min said, his Kaler perfect. "Commander Kim Jae sends his regards. You have violated every code of interstellar engagement," the speaker said, the old anger returning. "You used deceit. You attacked without declaration. You targeted non-combat systems." Lee Yuna answered, not looking at the speaker, but at a nearby control panel. "You demanded the surrender of our species. You gave us 24 hours. We used that time to win. Is that not logical?" The speaker had no answer to that. "We are not here to negotiate your surrender," Park Min continued. "That is assumed. We are here to deliver a message. And a lesson." Lee Yuna walked forward, ignoring the armed guards. She went straight to the main control console for the hangar bay. The Kaler soldiers tensed, but the speaker raised a hand, stopping them. It was fascinated by this small human's boldness. Lee Yuna opened her case. She did not pull out a weapon. She pulled out a data crystal, clear and smooth. She inserted it into a port on the console. "This is a universal interface. It will not damage your systems. Contains one file. You will play it on your main bridge viewer, for all your crews to see." The speaker hesitated. This was another trick. It had to be. "If we wanted to destroy you," Lee Yuna said, finally looking at it, "you would already be dead. Your ship is ours. We are being polite. Play the file." The order was given. On the bridge and on every screen across the surviving Kaler fleet, the file open.it began not with words but with images. Grainy, ancient footage. Trenches from a world war. Men living in mud. The burning cities of another. The haunted faces of survivors from a dozen genocides. Nuclear fireballs blooming over oceans. Then, more recent strife. Orbital debris from early space conflicts. The scorched marks of civil wars on Mars. The video showed humanity's darkest hours. Its cruelty, its madness, its relentless self-destruction. It was a parade of horror, set to a slow, somber drumbeat. The speaker watched, confused. Was this meant to frighten them? They knew humans were violent. Then the images changed. It showed the discovery of the Kaler probe. It showed the secret meetings. It showed the decision. The words of a younger Kim Jae flashed on the screen. "They see a child. We cannot win a fair fight, so we will not fight fair." It showed the building, not of glorious starships, but of dark factories in asteroids. It showed the forging of the kinetic rods, the testing of the plasma cutters on stolen Kaler hull metal. It showed engineers like Lee Yuna, working for decades in silence, their families thinking they were on mining missions. The message became clear. The video was not just a history. It was an explanation. It was a blueprint. The final image was text written in both Korean and the Kaler script. "You judged us by the wars we fought against ourselves. You thought they made us weak. You were wrong. They were our training. We learned every way a civilization can die. So we learned every way to kill one. We looked into the abyss for a century, speaker. And then we built a home there. Do not come to our home again." The screen went black.in the hangar bay. The silence was absolute. The Kaler soldiers had lowered their weapons, their eyes wide behind their helmets. The speaker understood now. This was not a victory speech. It was a threat deeper than any weapon. Humanity was not showing its strength. It was showing its nature. It was saying, "Our darkness is older and more studied than you can imagine. We have turned our own evil into a shield. Approach, and you will meet the monster we forged from our own worst sins." Park Min stepped forward. The file is yours. Take it back to your hegemony. Show them. Tell them that Earth is not a prize. It is a fortress, guarded by ghosts who remember every war. You came for a surrender. You found a mirror. Look into it and then go. Li Yuna retrieved her crystal. Her job was done. She turned and walked back to the shuttle without another word. The speaker watched them go. The three small humans leaving its magnificent, conquered ship felt a cold deeper than space. They had not come to gloat. They had come to teach. And the lesson was the most terrifying thing the Kalar hegemony had ever learned. That some species, when pushed, do not build higher walls. They dig deeper pits and wait for you to fall in. The Kalar ships left the solar system. They did not leave in glory. They limped. The command ship, with 5 other damaged vessels, moved slowly towards the edge, where they could safely jump away. The hulks of their sister ships were left behind, dark and silent tombs drifting among the asteroids on Earth. The public story was one of miraculous diplomacy. The government announced that the brave efforts of translators and peacemakers had convinced the Kalar of humanity's right to self-rule. There were celebrations in the streets. A holiday was declared. People cried with relief, hugging strangers under skies that were no longer threatened. But in the quiet halls of power, and in the hidden places like Vigil, no one celebrated. Commander Kim Jae stood before a viewport, looking at the stars. The battle was over, but his face showed no victory. It showed only a deep, tired lines. Li Yuna approached, her steps soft. She held a data pad with repair reports. The fleet took heavy losses, she said quietly. We lost more than a third of the dark platforms. 2 of our manned destroyers are salvage. The cost was high.
Kim Jae nodded.
He knew the numbers. They had won by appearing invincible. But the reality was brittle steel and dead crews recovered from blackened hulls. And their debris? Being collected. Every piece. We'll learn more from their wreckage than we did from the probe. They stood in silence. The Kalar had been sent running. But they would be back. Or others would come. The galaxy now knew Earth existed, not as a child, but as a dangerous animal. Some would want to cage it. Park Min joined them, looking older than he had a week before. The message is being analyzed on 1,000 Kalar worlds by now. Lesson. Do you think they understood? They understood fear, Kim Jae said, his voice low. They understood immediate threat. I do not know if they understood the warning. To understand the warning, they would have to understand us. And I am not sure we understand ourselves anymore. He turned from the stars. The dark fleet was returning to its holes. The ships that could be repaired were being towed to hidden shipyards inside hollow asteroids. The ones that were gone were being replaced by new builds, already under construction for years. The work did not stop. It accelerated. Humanity had looked into the dark forest of space and had not seen wonder. It had seen a reflection of its own past. An endless, brutal competition where the strong consumed the weak. And so, they had chosen not to hide, and not to shine a light. They had chosen to become part of the dark. Li Yuna's whispering codes were now being adapted, upgraded. The androids on the Kalar ship had collected new data on alien biology, on internal security. The next unwelcome visitors would face even more subtle, more personal ghosts on Earth. The parks were full of people enjoying peace. Children played, unaware that their safety was paid for by a monstrous, hidden engine of war that their grandparents had built in secret. The engineers and soldiers who manned that engine returned home to their families, kissed their spouses, and said nothing of what they did. They carried the silence with them, a second skin. Kim Jae received his final orders from the Global Council. They were simple: maintain the deterrent, make it stronger, make it smarter. The budget was increased, but the secrecy was absolute. The public victory was the story. The Dark Fleet was the truth. Years would pass. The Kalar hegemony would enter into a cold, distant relationship with Earth. There would be no friendship, only a wary, formal recognition of borders. They would speak of humanity in cautious tones, a new and unsettling entry in their galactic records. And humanity? It did not expand. It did not send out hopeful colony ships. Turned inward, fortified. It watched the sky with 10,000 hidden eyes, each one connected to a weapon. Kim Jae, an old man now, sometimes visited the memorial. It was a simple, black wall on the far side of the moon, hidden from Earth. It listed the names of every human who had died building and crewing the Dark Fleet. There were no grand statues, no flags, just names etched in cold stone, lit by the reflected glow of a distant, peaceful Earth. He would touch the name of a young pilot he had known. He would remember Lee Yuna's fierce focus, now turned to teaching a new generation of engineers how to build better shadows. He would think of Park Min, who would become the public face of Earth's diplomatic corps, a man whose every polite smile was a lie told to keep the nightmare at bay. They had saved their world. They had proven that humanity would not be conquered. But as he stood by the memorial, Kim Jae wondered what they had conquered in themselves to do it. They had embraced a terrible, practical darkness to protect the light of home. And now that darkness was a part of them. Forever he looked up from the names to the stars, not with wonder, but with the calm, patient watchfulness of a sentry. The dark armada was out there, sleeping but never dreaming, waiting. The message had been sent. The lesson had been delivered. The universe could leave them alone, or it could meet the ghosts they had become. The choice was no longer theirs.